I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us.
I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many long months of struggle and of suffering. You ask, what is our policy? I will say, it is to wage war by sea, land, and air, with all our might, with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark and lamentable catalogue of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be. For without victory there is no survival.
Now we are the masters of our fate. That the task which has been set us is not above our strength. That its pangs and toils are not beyond our endurance. As long as we have faith in our cause and an unconquerable willpower, salvation will not be denied us.
Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. Let us, therefore, brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
Well, I'd like to offer you a warm welcome to my YouTube today. I'm here at the house my mother was born in 1928, and she would have been 11 at the start of the war, and she lived here for several years and endured all the bombing and the Blitz and everything, and was a great collector of artifacts that she found out and about. In the early part of the Blitz, she lived here in this, well, as you can see today, it's a relatively quiet part of Plymouth. Mutley Park is just opposite over there. Mutley's in the area of Mannamead, and she lived here and endured the all the bombs, the explosions and all the trouble. And my grandfather was in the Royal Navy, and he was an instructor down in Keyham at the college there in Devonport, so he was equally in daily danger, and had to travel to and fro on the bus, which must have been quite a precarious travelling journey, but nevertheless they didn't move out of Plymouth until 1943, so it was quite a tough time from 1940 to 43. 3 years of the Blitz, 3 years of bombing, quite a tough time. But I've put together this compilation of bits and pieces. I hope you enjoy it. So sit back, sit tight, and pin your ears back and enjoy the film. Thank you.
My name is Michael Sandel. I'm a sculptor and a draftsman and printmaker. And I was born before the war, and I remember the Blitz of Plymouth very clearly. I was 5 years old, and you do not forget seeing barrage balloons in flames. You do not forget walking past great big craters full of water and waking up because of the sirens and looking up in the sky and seeing the puffs of where the anti-aircraft guns are firing at planes. I never saw any dogfights, but I do remember that I wasn't scared, but I know my mother was. And I remember one day, one afternoon, my sister's pram was in the backyard, and I went out and I looked up and I saw a German aeroplane right above my head, and I could see very clearly the black crosses on its wings. Then the air raid siren went. My mother claimed that we were machine gunned when we were running to the shelters. There were two shelters. There was the Anderson shelter and there was a really big one up the hill. We were running up the hill and she said we were machine gunned. Well, maybe. It is a fact, however, that the coal bin in the backyard was full of holes and there was shrapnel in the backyard, so maybe it's true. I know the next door neighbour was dead, was found dead, and that's why my mother decided, quite rightly, to leave, so we ended up in Cornwall. And I remember her sitting in the kitchen of this farm, where we were all evacuated, bursting into tears because she got a letter saying her house had been bombed. You never forget seeing cities in ruins. It's etched into your mind forever. And it's something that I think about rather a lot in a lot of my work. I've done a lot of work about pilots, because they fascinate me. And the more I think about it, the more of an obscenity it becomes, particularly as I've lived in Germany 30 years. So the people who were trying to kill me and the people we were trying to kill, we're now our friends.
One, two, three.
They were frightened, and if you cuddled them and said, oh, well, it's all right, they thought they were safe then.
We didn't really know what war was. It was more of an adventure.
If you found shrapnel, good gracious, it was wonderful. A lot of the children would say, look, I've collected this. Gosh, I've got 6 pieces today.
Again last night, the Luftwaffe carried out a successful attack on Plymouth. Nothing remains of the city but piles of rubble interspersed with vast bomb craters, with the result that chaos has disrupted the entire way of life of the people. Plymouth is concentrated. Plymouth is devastated beyond repair.
No other city in the world, I should think, had to endure what worse than Plymouth had. Some of us had prophesied before, if you don't stop Hitler in Spain, if you don't stop him bombing Guernica, he'll be coming Plymouth later on, and we actually said that in our newspapers. When it happened, of course, it was absolutely devastating.
Well, I was a boy of 7, and we knew when the sirens went off that you had to make your way to your shelter. Either there was one in the backyard, or there might be a more communal shelter. And for us, we had to run, I would think, about 200 yards to the nearest underground shelter. As soon as the siren sounded, all you did was you rushed to the shelter. So I don't know whether I had a teddy bear or anything like that. You wouldn't even think of picking it up. Because on the way, if you heard a whistling sound, then that would be the noise as an incendiary bomb would be falling, and you had to throw yourself onto the floor. It didn't matter how mucky the lane was or the road, you just threw yourself down. You just had to move, and move fast. Well, when we got back from this particular raid, there had been a flood of creosote, which is like a kind of fluid tar. Worst of all for us was that with it being an underground shelter, all this creosote came down to flood into the underground shelter. I had to be dragged by my mother up the steps, which seemed like a waterfall trying to push you back. The effect upon my legs were that they stung like mad for days. There was no treatment. You couldn't go to hospitals or a doctor. In the Blitz, the demand upon hospitals was for those who were seriously wounded or dying. And so you just had to bear it. One of the snags with being in an underground shelter is that if there was any flooding, of course, it went there. If there was anything that hit the outside of the shelter, then you could be trapped. But you were less likely to be killed by a high explosive bomb because you're underground. So the contrast between the two shelters, in a way, there was less danger if you were in the one close by you, but if you got a direct hit, there was no hope. Of course, once our house had been bombed like that, we couldn't live there. So you had to move in with relatives, which put added strain. They have their problems within their own family, and suddenly you've got another, in this case two, who have to be accommodated.
I can remember the siren going off, and I can remember my mother, she'd never say Angela, she'd say Angela. And I always knew, it was very strange how I remember that tone. You would lift it out of your bed, stuck in your siren suit, carried into the air raid shelter, and then there used to be a lull, and my father would go and make tea. I mean, it sounds so terribly glamorous, but of course it wasn't.
We had all the barrage balloons, Central Park, Blockhouse, Penley, everywhere barrage balloons, Ack Battery at Central Park. People would see, you know, army personnel, army trucks, especially with the Ack batteries. They never shot a lot down, but it was kept the morale up.
We had a stick of bombs, and I was coming downstairs with my baby in my arms, and I bumped all the way down the stairs, and when I got down to the bottom of the stairs, they eventually asked the doctor to come in and see, and he said, "Oh, I can't see much wrong with your back." He said, "There's plenty of people in London a lot worse off than you."
In 5 nights alone, 390 civilians died, and there were over 400 serious casualties. 1,500 houses were destroyed beyond repair, and 15 times that number seriously damaged. And those figures are only part of the final total.
A lot of people picked up all their bits and pieces and went out on the moors during the night and came in the morning. And, you know, that must have been an awful life to lead for months on end, but they felt safer there.
My mother and father, they used to gather all their customers around them and poke them all in the lorry, and they'd all come down, and I had a largish sitting room, a very large kitchen, and we used to put them all in there. They'd get into sleeping bags and sit on chairs anywhere. And the amazing part of it was, I used to go to bed as usual, and if we were lucky enough not to get a raid that night, I'd get up in the morning and the place was clear. They'd be all gone, you know, they'd just gather up their things and go.
I must say that the camaraderie between people at that time was absolutely wonderful. Everybody would help one another. There wasn't any sort of animosity or anything like that. You would all help one another.
We were in a communal shelter. When we came out in the morning, it was gone. You know, everything, the house, well, everything in it. So we were billeted then out to Neath Road, St Jude's, right behind Salisbury Road Church. We were out there not many months, and they dropped the landmine on the church and took the back of the house out. We were all in the shelter, the Anderson shelter. They'd dig us out. Most of the people in the houses of Salisbury Road, and quite a number of the kids that I went to school with were killed. Oh yeah, you saw a lot of dead bodies. I mean, you'd wander around the next day after the raid, and you'd see them still digging at you know, streets. One or two houses in the middle had been hit, and you'd see them trying to see if they could get anybody out or if there was any survivors there. It just everything went on around you.
I can remember being frightened of the noise, and I always remember at one point there was a tremendous blue flame, and I always remember them thinking it was very near, and it was the family at the bottom of the road. They had a direct hit on the house, and they were in their air raid shelter, and the neighbours went in and said, look, your house is gone, why not come over with us? And they said, no, we might just well stay here. And minutes later, they had a direct hit on the Anderson shelter, and everybody was killed. One night, my mother decided we hadn't missed an air raid on Plymouth, and she decided, she said, right, we're going to get out of Plymouth. We'll go to Plympton. And I can remember we walked to Plympton. And there used to be a tremendous amount of people, anything to get away from the air raids. And we'd walk along the Plymouth Road, and we went up, I think it was Plimbridge Road, and the vicarage. And the vicar took us all in, and we laid down, and we went to sleep on the floor. And but that was the one night we didn't have an air raid. So we still didn't miss an air raid.
Right now, children, business as usual. Let's practice our 5 times table. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10.
What did I think of Germans at the time? I think the Germans at the time as much as I think about them now, I think. I had no time for them at all.
You were frightened of them. You know, I think you listened to what people said, and you listened to your parents, and you were quite frightened.
I saw a couple of dead ones over at Painley. A plane came down over there, Painley Fields. That's up beyond where the Painley School is now. There was a barrage balloon site up there, and yeah, they came down with a plane. Wanted to see it, you see. It was fascinating, I suppose, but... And then you thought to yourself, you know, oh, that's a body there.
So came the captain. He asked me, you speak English? I said, no. You speak French? No. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Ja.
Helmut had recently come back from flying in the Mediterranean, and his squadron had been assigned to fly targets against Britain. They'd successfully carried out their mission, and they were on their way back when they had the misfortune to be intercepted by a Polish manned night fighter. Devastating cannon and machine gun fire hit the aircraft. It was obvious to them they wouldn't be able to go on, so at a certain time I think they all started bailing out, and the aircraft was left to its own devices.
The cool right Fläche, die rechte Fläche, and the right engine burned. This gasoline, you know. And I get up and look for my radio man because he was very wounded. It was only fire, but I had no chance to look or to wait. So I closed my eyes and let me fall down.
My phone went and said, Auntie, come up quickly. There's a plane on fire outside the door. But it was just, as I say, a flaming mess when I got there. And I think my sister-in-law, who was a large, stout woman, and I was afraid she was going to have a heart attack, you know.
The plane that attacked them successfully landed back at Exeter, and the next day the two Polish crew members came over to have a look at their handiwork.
They played Ring of Roses around this burnt-out aeroplane. They were really delighted, wild with excitement they were, and they danced around it, made a tremendous amount of fuss.
All we know is exactly what happened to Helmut. He landed and quickly hid his parachute and then decided to go on the run in the hope, I don't know what to do, but to try and get away from Plymouth or to try and get his way back to France.
I get up, I looked, have everything wrong, take my pistol, because he told us you have to be, if you the English farmer, he comes with a fork, you know.
He apparently wandered through the suburbs of Plymouth and had the misfortune just to walk into what was believed to be a Home Guard patrol who captured him immediately.
We stand there and talk. Suddenly came the Land Rover, an English officer of the Navy, a policeman with black hat, and two English sailors with bayonet, gun. I think, what's he want to do here? Oh, for myself! Oi, 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 I thought, what's the matter now?
Winston Churchill and Mrs. Churchill toured the ravaged city in May.
We will have no truce or parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best.
Thus it continued, with an ever-lessening impact after the first terrors, until the last, all clear of all, in the April of 1944. By then, the damage had become incalculable, with a total list of almost 4,500 civilian casualties and an immensity of unrevealed service personnel dead.
Not only was Plymouth hit harder almost than any other city, but Plymouth also started to make its recovery before any of the others. It was a terrible scene to clear up, and people thought the devastation was so great that there couldn't be any recovery, but after a period, a year or so, people were planning how to deal with it, and here in Plymouth, we were making those kind of plans before anybody else.
What a mess it all is. It's such a waste. That's what gets me.
But what an opportunity.
What do you mean, sir?
A town should be for the townsfolk what the country estate is for the rich man. A pleasant home to live in. Without this, we might never have had the chance.
Trees and green and pots, and it's going to be the most beautiful city in the world.
Will there be sandpits?
Yes, there'll be lots of sandpits and heaps of swimming pools.
Will there be air raid shelters?
No, we've seen the last of them, thank goodness.
In that case, I'm definitely against the plan.
Why?
If they're going to take in all the air raid shelters, how am I going to be able to play houses with Susan?
Sometimes I wonder whether it has been built as it should do, because it's very, very drafty in the city of Plymouth.
Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope you found it of some interest. It was certainly quite difficult for me to put together, bearing in mind my mother lived for several years during the Blitz of Plymouth. Thank you again. Take care. Cheers.